It's no joke. Terry McLaurin's new contract with the Commanders could be coming sooner rather than later. That and more right here from sunny Palm Beach, Florida on Locked On Commanders. I'm the best.
First take.
Yeah, first take.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you Monday through Friday. Your friend, your eyes, your ears on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com and also for WUSA9.com, your local DC CBS affiliate. I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode. In this episode, we are going to be talking about the 2025 NFL League rule changes that were approved here at the league meetings in Palm Beach, Florida. We're also going to be talking about Dan Quinn's comments on some of the new roster additions going on with the team, but we're going to start it all off with Terry McLaurin and his new contract coming potentially sooner rather than later, thanks to the words that Adam Peters, general manager, shared with the media here during the league meetings. Every dayers, those of you who come through every single day for every single episode, I want to thank you, give you a special thank you for being such a good part of this program. For everybody out there, if you're not already subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's episode, please take the time now to do so. And if you're new to the show, I want to thank you for finding the show. If you're new to the show, that intro, yes, was a little bit of an April Fool's joke. My son and I, 2 years in a row now, he has sat down here, done my cold open for me. It's becoming our new April Fool's Day tradition, so hopefully it didn't throw you off too much. My voice, however, not an April Fool's Day joke. Unfortunately, day one of the league meetings, I did get slapped down with food poisoning. And for those of you who've had food poisoning, there's a part of that comes that also tends to mess with your vocal cords if it's bad enough. And unfortunately, mine was bad enough. And I was actually held out of the last 2 days of the league meetings, wasn't able to go to the hotel for the meetings, for the interviews. But because I'm here as part of WUSA9's crew covering the event where there's teamwork, the dream works. So I've got plenty of footage and things to talk about thanks to our teammates, Chick Hernandez and David Agadello of WUSA9. So anyway, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Let's kick this whole thing off with the man of the hour, Terry McLaurin, of course, general manager Adam Peters, meeting with the media here in Florida this week, asked about Terry McLaurin, and here's what AP had to say.
Yeah, I think, short answer is we want to make Terry a commander for a long time. You know, he's a great commander. He got better and better as the season went on, not only as a player but as a leader. It was really impressive to see him grow so much when you think of Terry as this, pristine, polished player, but then he got even better, so it's really cool. Everybody can get better, even the great ones. So, but we've had talks with Terry's representation, and I think just like any talks we'll have, those will stay in the house. But it's been really positive.
All right, I think first and foremost, if you're a Commanders fan, you just gotta love hearing your general manager talk about Terry McLaurin in the way that Adam Peters just was. That you got to get that deal done. They're having the conversations. They're positive conversations. They're moving in a positive way. So what I wanted to do is kind of take that next step. Right, that's the headline. We all know we love it. I don't think anybody out there is going to sit here and say Terry McLaurin shouldn't be a part of this team or doesn't deserve to be a part of this team or this team isn't better for having Terry McLaurin on it. But I wanted to kind of dive a little bit into what that really means, right? So Terry McLaurin last signed a $68 million extension with the team in 2022 that made him the 9th highest paid receiver in the league in terms of average annual value. So that's the per year that you hear in the contract. It's not necessarily what he's going to make every year, not necessarily what he's going to count for against the salary cap every year, but it's just a good way of balancing all the contracts. Today, that deal that was the 9th best among wide receivers in the NFL in 2022, today now ranks 16th, right? So not a huge drop-off, but certainly a drop-off, right? Recently, Cincinnati Bengals receivers T. Higgins and Jamar Chase helped reset the receiver market with brand new contracts of their own. And this happens every offseason. So Jamar Chase's deal, the richest non-quarterback deal in NFL history, came in at just over $40 million per year, while Higgins came in at $28.75 million per year. Now, Higgins' deal, interestingly enough, currently ranks 9th best in the National Football League. And while he is, according to Chase, the Cincinnati Bengals 1A receiver, it's highly likely that Terry McLaurin's agent is going to want his client to earn more on average than the guy that everybody else calls the Cincinnati Bengals number 2 receiver, right? Which is T. Higgins. That's no shade, dude. You're number 2 receiver to Jamar freaking Chase. It's not an insult. That's just, that's just what it is. So current spot track estimations peg Terry McLaurin's market value in the range of $30 million per year. That exact amount would place him just outside the top 5 of NFL receivers in annual average value, 1 spot behind A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, I'm sure no Commanders fans are going to be upset if Adam Peters and Josh Harris find a way to make McLaurin just a little bit more money than A.J. Brown is getting, put him in that top 5, push A.J. Brown outside that top 5, and put McLaurin ahead of that Eagles receiver. Now, in an exclusive interview with WUSA9's Chick Hernandez, Adam Peters added to the conversation saying, quote, I think Terry's earned that. Terry's earned that, and he's been earning that for a long time for this organization, long before we got here. So it's a priority, end quote. And I don't mean he's earned that as far as getting paid more than A.J. Brown, but he's earned that new contract. He's earned that extension that is hopefully coming very, very soon. That is what AP is saying that Terry McLaurin has earned. And I think certainly, right, he's been here through 3 logos, 3 names, 3 head coaches, 3 general managers, right? Like he's been through so many ups and downs with this franchise alone and maintained a positive atmosphere or attitude about it, right? And not just in front of the cameras, guys, like behind the cameras, he's always happy to be at work. He's always happy to see people. He's always doing those things. And look, I'm sure there's times where he's driving home and he's not as happy, but he always kind of puts on that good soldier act. And sometimes it has to be an act. That's just the reality of life if you're going to be a marquee player for the National Football League. But I think Terry has done those things. So what could that contract look like? Well, to be A.J. Brown's contract, they have to go above $32 million annual average value. So let's call it $32.5 million annually just to keep it clean, right? It could be 32.1, 32.265, right? It could be any of those things. But let's call it 32.5. And honestly, I don't know that jumping A.J. Brown is a priority here. So it could be around 30 million. You know what I mean? And Terry comes in at number 6 overall. And he's fine with that, something like that. But roughly, and there's no exact equation here, right? But looking at some other contract trends, roughly 70% of it you would think would probably be guaranteed. So that'd be around $22.75 million. Roughly 36% of the contract would be paid out and more importantly accounted for in bonuses that the team can then spread over the life of the contract and even into void years if absolutely necessary. That'd be about $11.7 million. Of course, those are per year numbers. The trendy length of a contract seems to be about 4 years long. So that math would work out to about 4 years, $130 million, $91 million guaranteed, $46.8 million, and bonuses of various types, roster bonuses, proration bonuses, workout bonuses, etc. And that can fluctuate, right? The guarantees and the bonuses can fluctuate and all that. So that's not as much a prediction, just an example of what a new Terry McLaurin contract might look like on the surface level, called a mock contract. Last time Terry McLaurin signed a new contract, that extension we just talked about in 2022, nearly 80% of it was guaranteed. So his agent is probably going to shoot for something in that range compared to the 70. So 10% more guaranteed money. Usually you're probably going to tack that into bonuses. So that bonus number then goes up a little bit more as well. But that's about what we're looking at. And when you look at everything that Terry McLaurin has done, continues to do, when you look at what he did with Jaden Daniels in year 1 and what he should be able to do with the additions of Deebo Samuel, Noah Brown coming back, etc., I think he's going to be definitely well worth the money. So that's some really good news already coming out of the league meetings here in Palm Beach, Florida. But Chick Hernandez also sat down with Dan Quinn. I've got video of that interview. We're going to break that down, and I'm going to share with you some of the highlights of that interview coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today in part thanks to our friends over at Monarch Money. And Monarch Money wants to know if you've ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal chief financial officer, CFO, giving you your full visibility and control over your finances. But Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. So you can track all your accounts, investments, and your spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money, start building wealth, start planning whatever that big purchase is. To come down here to Florida, I brought my family down. We had to rent a house. We had to have all the expenses taken care of. And you obviously also want to have that buffer space for all the what ifs that could happen in a trip, right? Well, Monarch Money helps me and my family planned for that entire thing. And so far, other than a couple of health bugs that have popped up, everything has gone smoothly because we had all of it budgeted out completely. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. So when we look at the current odds for March Madness remaining Saturday, we got a couple of killer games. We got 1v1 and 1v1. Florida versus Auburn. Florida favored by 2.5 points in that contest. Houston facing Duke. Duke is favored by 4.5 points in that contest. So some really good matchups coming on. Whatever you want to bet on. If it's not college hoops, it's got everything else going on under the sun. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action or whatever action you want all season long. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders, and fortunately for my voice and for your ears, most of this you're going to hear from is Dan Quinn. And this first clip, and again, this is from Chick Hernandez's exclusive one-on-one for WUSA9. I am here this week as part of the WUSA9 team. So we did this interview with Dan Quinn on Sunday morning before all the festivities started here at the league meetings in Palm Beach, Florida, before I got sick. And so fortunately, we had this footage to share with you all as well. But we're going to start off with conversation about some of the new arrivals: Laremy, Tunsil, Deebo Samuel, Javon, Kinlaw, and Will Harris specifically. Here is DQ, and you're going to hear the voice of Chick Hernandez.
Deebo Samuel, Laremy Tunsil on the offensive side. I imagine Laremy is a comfort for you and your quarterback because he will protect his blind side.
Yeah, what a cool addition, to add somebody of Laremy's, caliber to play that position. As everybody knows, it's just one of the hardest spots, and he's done it at such a high level. So to add guys like Laremy and Deebo into this crew and, have them, be part of how we're doing things moving forward, kudos to Adam and his staff to add to a really, really cool team. Getting a chance to visit with Deebo, coming here and talking to him and getting to know him and knowing, man, what a good fit it is for him and really for us to make sure, like that part is so important to us. We know how strong the locker room is and what that can be.
Sure.
And so to add guys like that and getting to know him and his family and, being a part of things here, that's a really big deal.
Defensively, Javon, Kinlaw. So when you meet a player,
Yes.
What are you trying to glean from them?
Well, one, I want them to know, coming in here, we have really high standards for them. And in JK's spot, we wanted to make sure, man, allow him to fully express himself and all the things that he can do. And we want to make sure we can deliver on that too, because it's a two-way street. It's us as coaches putting them in the right spots to do their thing, and it's them as the players coming in, to make sure they're fully ready, to be a part of it. And so to have him, who's also actually, from the DMV,
Right.
and has, history and roots here, that's a really cool thing.
Will Harris, safety. You lose Jeremy Chin,
Yes.
who, just the guy who was watching, was a heat-seeking missile during that season for you guys. Will Harris comes in and brings what?
A lot of versatility. And so he and Quan, so many good skill sets, good tackler, good speed. This is a former corner, much like Quan, where he can play in the slot, he can play in the safety spot. So being able to be interchangeable on the back end allows you to do even more with your disguise. Good tackler, good ball guy. So yeah, we're really excited to add Will to the group.
All right, once again, that was DQ on new Commanders: Laremy Tunsil, Deebo Samuel, Javon Kinlaw, and Will Harris. And I think you have to really just appreciate the understanding, right? That Laremy Tunsil, left tackle, no, he isn't coming off the greatest season, especially from a penalties perspective, right? It's something that he talked about extensively as well with us, but he is playing one of the hardest positions in the game today. So for the team to go out there and make such a concerted effort to make sure that that left tackle position, protecting Jaden Daniels' blind side, was solidified as best they could, you really love that effort. And then to hear that Dan Quinn thinks so highly of him and how much he's going to be a part of this locker room, I think it's just great too. You hear the same thing about Deebo Samuel, how it's such a good fit for him, but also for the Commanders, and how important it was to go out there, yes, get really good players, get really impactful players, but also protect the standard that was set last year inside of that locker room. So it gives you a little bit more confidence for those who have some concerns with these two additions specifically, that they've been vetted, right? These are vetted decisions that are going to tilt the right way. Javon Kinlaw, I really like the part there where DQ talks about not just wanting Javon to understand, hey, you're entering this locker room with this set standard and this high expectation, but also we want you to be you, right? Set the left and right boundaries, but then be you. It reminds me a lot of this very network, Locked On Podcast Network. We've got certain things we have to say in the beginning of the shows, certain things we got to say in the middle, certain things we got to say in the end. But between those lines, we color the show how we want to color the show. That's why you turn on any Locked On show and you're going to get some that are more professional like this one. You're going to get some that are super fanboy out, and that's fine with those guys. Everybody gets to do their show their way within the parameters that the network sets. So when you get to Javon Kinlaw, that's the dude who likes to play with his hair on fire, is super aggressive. He's going to be allowed to do those kinds of things. And the two-way street that comes up from being the coaches, putting him in the right position to do so. And then Will Harris was a really interesting conversation for me that I want to dive into later on in the program, not necessarily this week, but as we get in deeper into the offseason, especially as it pertains to mock drafting, because Chick was right in his question. He says, you guys lose Jeremy Chin, you bring in Will Harris, and that is really kind of the transfer that everybody's taken on, right? But what Dan Quinn says is Will Harris is very similar to Quan Martin. And that's something that stuck out to me. It was like, this isn't your big hybrid linebacker thumper type of guy. This is more of your solid box safety with better coverage skills, good tackler, good speed. Mentions that Will Harris used to be a corner just like Quan. But he also mentions his interchangeability on the back end, right? And that is something that the Commanders didn't have with Jeremy Chin and Quan Martin as their two primary safeties. Now, they tried to supplement that by when they brought Jeremy Chin into the box, Percy Butler came on as that second safety. He's more of a coverage type of guy, doesn't really have the tackling ability. So you kind of look at it, okay, is Will Harris the new Percy Butler, where he's not necessarily going to be like the starter at the top of the depth chart, but more so a guy that when that strong safety hybrid linebacker drops in the box, he comes on the field. Is he going to come in and compete with Quan Martin to be the starting free safety? And now Quan becomes that rotational piece? Or is there not even going to be a strong safety hybrid linebacker like Jeremy Chin coming in the draft? And is this just the new defense, right? Because talk to a lot of defensive coordinators, and what they love is the opportunity for offense to move and defense to not move. So if I've got a look here where I have a too high safety look and Will Harris, left side safety, strong side safety, whatever you want to call it, strong side safety is going to crash the box, weak side safety is going to play coverage. You now shift to where your weak side and strong side swap, but I don't have to move any of my guys. Now I just understand, well, now I'm the strong side, so I'm crashing. Well, now I'm the weak side, so I'm bailing. That is the ultimate poker chip, chess piece for a defensive coordinator, to be able to have players on the field that I don't need to shift and I don't need to tilt anything or tip my hand when an offense moves. So it's it's interesting because there's really three avenues that you can take away from what Dan Quinn said about Will Harris. So just some really interesting things that Dan Quinn said about the new players arriving here to the Washington Commanders roster. I thought that really resonated, and I really took away from Chick's interview with DQ. Next up, we're going to talk about everything that's been happening here in Palm Beach, the league meetings, and some of the rule changes that were passed this week that are going to affect the Commanders and everybody in 2025. That's coming up next in today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders here in sunny Palm Beach, Florida. League meetings are just wrapping up here Tuesday evening as we get through this April Fool's Day episode. Nothing that's being said on this episode is a joke. I promise you all of it is legit and true. So one of the rules that got passed here this week, the dynamic kickoff, the new kickoff format that we saw introduced last year was a tentative, was a test run, a trial. The NFL has decided to keep it. However, they're going to keep it, make it permanent while adding two slight adjustments. One adjustment comes with how the receiving team can orchestrate and place their players. We'll get more into that as we get into training camp and see how special teams coordinator Larry Izzo decides to leverage that or not leverage it. But the big one is the new touchback rule. So now the touchback is going to go from the 30 to the 35-yard line. So Dan Quinn was asked by our own Chick Hernandez, WUSA9 sports director, about his thoughts on the new dynamic kickoff adjustment plus it becoming permanent. Here's what DQ had to say.
So we're here, West Palm Beach, the league meetings. All of your brethren, your head coaches will be here. What is that like? this, because I don't think you're getting a whole lot of work done. I know you are. What is that like to be with 31 other guys who are in the same position?
It's an honor. And some of my favorite parts are being in the meetings and being a part of maybe a rule change or a rule proposal. So this started well before any of us who were the head coaches, and advancing the game. How can it be better? How can we take care of the players better? So whether it's health and safety or a competitive measure or a change in kickoff or how do we do things, like being a part of that and hearing it, it's a really cool experience because this was done years and years ago with all the coaches that you and I watched growing up, and it'll be going on years and years from now when we're not. But so that being a part of that process and getting a chance to vote on rule changes and things that can affect the game, man, that's a responsibility that I don't walk away from. Like, I know the importance of that.
Let's talk 2 rules. They're going to move the kickoff. The proposal is move the kickoff to the 35 now on the touchback.
Yep.
You in favor of that?
I am in favor of putting that ball in play. And I think you saw our team, we really committed to that. And I think if we weren't at the top, we were at the top in terms of the times that the team returned it. So we love finding an edge on the kickoff and see if we can gain to that. And so we're hopeful that we continue this. It's been, I thought, excellent for so many good core special teams players. And I think of Jeremy Reeves, I think of Nick Ballore, and I think of the impact that they made covering kicks and bringing energy to our team. So anything that adds more of that, like, I'm in favor of.
The other thing that I found stunning is the proposal that the illegal contact down the field, instead of being an automatic first down, which has bailed out a lot of offenses over the years, they want to make that not so. How do you feel about that?
As you're going in, you look at all the sides to it, and we'll find out, over the next few days. But I would say from the offensive perspective, that would be one that many of the offensive coaches would not be in favor of.
That's well put, by the way.
Thank you.
And isn't that about the quintessential DQ answer to a question like that? We want the ball in play. The NFL wants the ball in play. So that is the whole point of moving the touchback yardage line. Now it's going to be at 35 yards. So if you don't want to put the ball in play, you're just going to give your opponent even more free real estate. And in a game of inches, every yard matters, every inch counts, all those things. So, we'll have to see how much it inspires other teams, to go ahead and put the ball in play. It would be kind of hard pressed for me to believe that the league would potentially shift to putting the touchback at the 40-yard line. That would be a little rich, but we'll see how the effects go here. So you also love hearing Dan Quinn, bring up the names of guys like Jeremy Reeves, Nick Ballore, these special teams aces that mean so much to certain teams, but quite honestly don't mean as much to other teams because they don't put the ball in play like that. So if every other team is forced to put the ball in play more, now those opportunities show up. And when you talk about roster construction, especially your 5th, 6th, 7th round guys, your guys like Jordan McGee out of Temple last year for the Commanders, you're looking at these safeties, you're looking at these tight ends that can run and tackle, you're looking at these linebackers who can play special teams, be part of those coverage teams, be part of those receiving teams in this new dynamic kickoff system that are really going to help teams. So it really has a genuine impact across the board in the game because, again, let's say, and this is just an example, let's say the Arizona Cardinals still kick the ball out the end zone and say, we'll just give you the yards. We're not worried about putting the ball in play. Well, that's your strategy as a team. You don't need to worry as much about, do you have the types of bodies, do you have the types of players to really flesh out a coverage team as well as a team like the Washington Commanders who put the ball in play more than any other team in the NFL. But now if they have to do that as well, everybody's got to get on that same page, which is really interesting thing there. One of the rule changes that didn't pass, getting rid of the automatic first down attached to a legal contact, that was something that I kind of hoped would pass, but it didn't pass. So as of 2025, if you get an illegal contact penalty, it's 5 yards and it's an automatic first down. 3rd and 20, a legal contact penalty, 5-yard penalty, and a first down. I don't like it. Most of you probably don't like it. It is what it is. The majority of the coaches in the league are offensive coaches. Asking them to give away free first downs probably not going to work out too well. So that's everything happening here in Palm Beach. Again, we're going to talk more about the things going on. We got more to pull from Adam Peters' time with the media and everything. We've got another mailbag episode coming up this week as I get ready to prepare for my trip back home to Virginia. And the next thing coming up is April's NFL draft. So, we got a lot to talk about heading into that. So I want to thank you for coming through here. For your next listen, speaking of the NFL draft, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez are going to get you ready for everything that's going to go down at the end of this month. As always, I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every dayers. I appreciate you coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. So I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But I want to leave you with Dan Quinn's thoughts, his message to you, the fans, coming into this next season.
Well, I think the first thing is, man, gratitude for creating the environment we saw towards the end of the season. When I look back at our last regular season game versus Atlanta, man, I felt it. I felt the energy, I felt home field advantage, all those things that mean so much to a team. So I think that would be the first thing, to express our team's gratitude for the way that the community and the stadium, it just felt like exactly like, football here in the DMV is supposed to feel, and what we had hoped for, Adam and I and the team going into it. So that would be, the first thing. And then as we're getting to it, man, we expect our team to really go after it, and do everything we can to improve and find our space and go for it in the biggest way. So just know we're working hard to do that.